Hello and welcome back, and that's right, it's another testing session for an SSD for the PS5, and today we're looking at a slightly different one there. Today we are looking at an SSD from Titan Micro. Now, before we go any further, let's flick on to the product page, and as you can see there, this is the SSD we are testing today, the TH7175. It's an NVMe, it's got some fantastic stats to back it up, indeed. If we scroll down here to the bottom and have a little look at these specifications, we can see that not only is this another SSD that features the Phison E18, one of the best SSD controllers of the market right now, but this PCIe Gen 4x4 SSD has got some serious performance benchmarks to back it up. Today we are utilizing the 1TB option, the 1TB option here, which reports 7,150 megabytes per second sequential read and 5,600 megabytes per second sequential write. Again, this is an SSD that if you get it at the top end of the performance there, it's some seriously high stuff here. It's probably the third, maybe tied for second fastest SSD that I've been featuring here on the tests. And again, we've still got a couple more to come. We come out of it there. Let's flick back here onto the PlayStation 5 operation screen. And again, we are going to be testing games that we have tested in previous videos. This is the first test of the Titan Micro SSD today, but it's worth highlighting we do still have 2 more videos to do on this. Today we're testing Demon's Souls, Ratchet and Clank, Resident Evil Village, Doom and GTA. But before any of that, what we should do is make our way into formatting this SSD and seeing what the performance benchmark is from the PS5. The PS5 has rated this SSD at 6,557 megabytes per second, a clear 1,000 more than is the recommended minimum, which is great to see. So for now, let's make our way into this SSD drive and start moving over the data. Now, again, I tested a lot of SSDs in multiple tests with multiple games per drive, and this SSD has just arrived with us today, and later today I will be testing the ADATA Gamix, and we still have the Inland Performance drive as well. We're going to double check the storage area there, have a quick look, and as you can see right there, boom, there's our 1TB drive there. So the first thing we're going to do is start moving over some of these games. So we're going to head back in. And as mentioned, we're just going to find one of our mini games that we're going to be utilising today. Again, later on, we will be looking at GTA. So let's go into GTA. And from there, we can move the data over for our assembly of games for today's test. So we're going to be playing GTA 5. We're going to be playing Doom Eternal, Resident Evil Village, Ratchet and Clank, and Demon's Souls. All of them PS5 games, and all of them picked for their own specific reasons. But for now, let's move that data over to the SSD. Now, if you haven't watched any of my SSD tests before, and there have been a lot of them, you may not be aware that when it comes to the internal SSD of the PlayStation, although it does have a reported sequential read of 5.5 gigabytes per second, it's worth remembering that the internals of this system definitely perform some kind of bottleneck. Even though we're moving data from the internal SSD onto the Titan Micro drive here, both drives have got more than enough performance to move this 275 gigabytes of data a great deal quicker than this. The reason it's going to take a little bit longer, however, we're still not 100% certain on. In the middle there may be some kind of encryption, some kind of compression, some kind of block certification to avoid anti-piracy measures, we're not sure. But one way or another, moving data over from the internal SSD onto an expansion SSD or the other way is never as fast as you would expect from the internal specification. So although I'm providing you with the moving screen here, I would highlight that this is not indicative of the total read performance of the internal SSD and the total write performance of the expansion SSD we're using. And at the end of the video, we'll be moving this data back, and it will just demonstrate that there's certainly a bottleneck in the middle of the system for certification, for verification, or anti-piracy that is ensuring some kind of slowdown between the movement of these games. But for now, let's fast forward to the movement of this data and kick off with the tests for today. Right, so the games have been moved over. If we come out of here and go into the M.2 SSD management, we can see the SSD there with our games on board, all the games that we're going to be testing today. So, without further ado, let's go straight into our first game, and that is Demon's Souls. Now, Demon's Souls, one of the launch titles of the PS5. Again, one of the games that takes advantage of that internal SSD quite well. We've got two things that we're going to be performing today. The first one is how quickly it loads into the Nexus, and then we're going to see how quickly it loads into individual archstones. Now, again, this is a game that hasn't really been too troubled by different SSDs. I've not seen too much slowdown. The only exception being the Sabrent Rocket Q4, which is already a drive that wasn't really hugely suitable for these tests. But for now, we're going to go in, we're going to make sure this is an offline game, and we're going to see how quickly it loads into the Nexus. 3, 2, 1. And lovely and quick there, loaded straight into the world. We've got the lighting there sort of kicking in there. If there's any pixelation there on screen, I'm sorry, that is the capture card keeping up with the high frame rate. But for now, it's looking pretty standard for me there. Again, the world is all in. I think we can call that a success. Everything's running fine. Let's make our way into that first archstone. So this is the smithing ground that we're going to load in 3, 2, 1. And we're into the world there. Again, I'm only seeing the right hand side of the screen there. So you guys, when you're seeing a great deal more than me and you're seeing both of them side by side, the internal SSD versus that of the expansion SSD, do bear in mind that I can only see the one of them. But even now, this feels pretty normal. It's running absolutely fine. We've got the world surrounding there. And we're going to have a little look around, see what we've got here. But for me, that's looking pretty good. No problems there whatsoever. I think what we can do now is make our way back to that archstone and then load into a different world. Again, running fine. The lighting effects there, beautifully done, passing there through. We can carry on. Again, this is where one of the last times we're going to be testing this game. We've only got 2 more SSDs to test on it, but it's still holding up very well. Again, we're going to head back to the Nexus. Don't worry, we're not going to be rating this one. So let's come out of that. Now we're going to make our way to another archstone. So we're going to go through it here. So again, going to the start of the game, Gates of Altaria in 3, 2, 1. And again, another quick load there for us. Absolutely fine there. And what we can do is start making our way through this area here. We can have a little look around, get some of the textures and the assets all loaded out. Have a quick look at them, make sure everything's running fine. Maybe avoid getting stabbed in the face. But yeah, that seems to be fine by my books. Again, all the way to the top there. Lighting there, as we can see, it goes a little bit cloudy as you move into the next region. So you can maybe remove some assets. But for now, I think we can sort of pass through there, move back into the area, watch a lot of these assets be loaded in, with the mist not being used to hide them as much. But for now, I think that's a good enough test for me. Let's make our way into the next game, which is, of course, Ratchet and Clank. So we're loading up Ratchet and Clank now, and again, none of these games, with the exception of one, are we bench testing how quickly they load from the title screen because of the publisher logos and stuff like that, which have a tendency to slow things down. Also, some of these games do arrive originally on discs, but we have moved all data over to the internal system. The discs are only being used as verification and checks at load. None of the data is being removed from the disk. As you can hear, the disk drive only spins up at the beginning when the system is being booted for each game. But after that, no SSD, no CD, or I should say Blu-ray disc being utilised. But for now, we've got our 2 saves that we've used previously, one of the start of the game, and this one, there's lots of assets being drawn in. So without further ado, let's get straight into this in 3, 2, 1, go. Lovely and quick there, exactly what I would have liked. Moving absolutely fine. And again, we're just going to move on to the first kind of big cutscene of the game. But for now, we're just going to be moving. What we're looking at now is the background assets, making sure everything's been loaded in effectively. And making sure the frame rate doesn't drop, that no low texture polys get introduced instead of high. Just effectively just trying to make sure that all of the visual resources and assets are being brought in there during this semi-on-rails segment here. But for now, seemingly running fine to me. It's kind of exactly what I would expect from this game. And again, we have tested this game quite a few times now, so we're kind of sick of it. But again, we are utilising a couple of areas of the game where there's just a lot of visual assets being brought in, which is kind of where this high read performance is going to be at its most important. Because a lot of people assume that loading is just a one-time thing. You load a game and then you play the game, but it isn't. Modern gaming takes advantage of a great deal of kind of on-the-fly loading, which means a lot of the assets are being introduced a lot more gradually than people think. But here we are at the end of that cutscene, so I think from now we can make our way back into the start of the game, and from here load up our other save spot, which is at a stage of the game about 15-20 minutes in, where there's a greater deal of loading assets being done in the world transition. 3, 2, 1. We move in. I'm going to play with the camera as well, just to show that lots of distinctions there. There was talk recently from one of the developers and people kind of pointing out about this preloading segment, bringing doubt into things on this. It's still quite an impressively loaded segment, whether you talk about the fact that it's got world transition with some of these closed asset areas, or the fact that they are all high quality textures as well. But for now, again, most of this area here, it's semi-on rails. This is the last segment here on the ship. And again, I'm not going to do any of the fighting. I'm just going to look around. I just want to see what else is in this area, really. See what the other assets are being brought into bear here. But yeah, there you go. That is the end of this segment as it goes into a cutscene, which I don't have any control over, which again marks the end of this segment transition here. So for now, let's make our way into our next game, which is Resident Evil Village. Resident Evil Village, we've got 2 save spots that we're going to be going through here today. Again, same ones we've been using previously. We're going to load game. The first one is going to be Escape the Castle. Nice and straightforward. We've done it before. Let's do it again. We're going to go in 3, 2, 1. Lovely and quick there. Exactly what I would have liked to see. Again, lovely, impressive stuff. Definitely rate it there. My own fault for not walking through a door properly there. But for now, we've got Lady Dimmerscrew walking behind us there, making a bit of a nuisance of herself, says the man walking around someone else's house with a gun. But yes, the textures, everything seems to have been loaded in. There's no drop in frame rate. Everything's how I would like to see it. Again, lots of world opening sort of stuff there, all going into other bits. Absolutely fine there. Again, we can carry on moving to another area. But for me, I'm quite pleased with that. I'd say these assets are all running fine. There's no drop in speed. We're not seeing any low textures as we move in very close, something Resident Evil does to hide a lot of the harder loading stuff. But for now, let's make our way into the other save game there. So we're going to quit the game. And this save game is later in the village, in the stronghold area. And then what we do is we run from the stronghold right the way back to the village to see if the game's going to have any difficulty loading any of that stuff. But for now, we've got the stronghold. Let's go in. 3, 2, 1. Lovely and quick. So now we're going to run back to the start of the game. Again, what we're looking for in this segment, as mentioned in other videos, is we are looking to see if, one, the game introduces a kind of slow down loading where it freeze screens and forces loading, or is it going to introduce low textures as we go through this game, as we run as quickly as we can, or whether we see a drop in frame rate. This is an area right here where lesser SSDs generally have that drop in frame rate. We didn't see it there, which is good. But as we move our way through with this title, again, we're more than, we'd say about halfway now towards the end goal of this sprint session here. But again, no difficulty with the graphics there. Everything's still looking pretty darn good. Again, any pixelation, ignore the pixelation. It's nothing to do with the game. It's all happening because of the conflict in the capture card at 29 frames. But still looking pretty good. All the graphics are exactly what I'd like to see. And as we make our way around and into the final stretch there, we're making our way back towards the altar. And at the altar, we've got the merchant. And yeah, absolutely fine. Things have run just as well as I would have liked for this SSD. So now let's come out of Resident Evil and make our way into Doom Eternal. So Doom Eternal we load in here because even though it's originally a PS4 game that has been upgraded to a PS5 version with better performance and sharper graphics, etc, etc, the main reason we use it is this is a game that takes advantage of quite intelligent texture loading. As you go through all the worlds, all the enemies, as they get further away, obviously they don't have to render pixel sharp graphics, so they make sure that they switch out high-res graphics or high-res textures into lower-res textures. But this game has a lot of up-close stuff with all the visceral attacks, and therefore it's quite useful to use as a way of measuring if a game's going to load in low textures, something we saw in the PS4 version of this game, not the PS4 Pro. But for now, let's load into the save spot we've been using before in 3, 2, 1. Again, nice and straightforward. It should be a nice, quick, easy load, but we are measuring this not only on the speed of it loading this area, but some of those textures, as mentioned, when we get up close. Because again, that is where we'll see any problems if this game has them with this SSD. We kind of knew this would run fine as is, but it's whether it's able to maintain the textures as we go through them to know that the game is doing what it's supposed to be doing with that SSD and that the SSD is not presenting itself as a bottleneck there. But for now, I think we're running fine there as we make our way through. But yes, I think that's fine. The game's running how I would like it to run. And for now, I think that's good enough. And let's make our way into the final game, which is GTA 5. Let's come out of that. GTA 5 is a game that we are measuring direct loading. So from the title screen to let's go in, we're going to load in 3, 2, 1. And for those that didn't follow, GTA 4 has some of the worst loading times in any game I've ever played. We will be featuring Red Dead in a following video coming soon. But GTA has some of the slowest loading I think most people have ever seen. It came out on the PS3, onto the PS4, and now a PS5 upgraded version coming soon. We are using the PS4 version today. But what we're mainly looking at is how quickly it loads us into the game. And therefore, after that, we'll go in the game for a short period of time to see if there's any asset loading problems, if we move fast enough. But again, generally, the SSDs have done better than the internal SSD on this game. The best to date has been the WD Black SN850, with everyone else being somewhere around half a second to even a full second longer, with the, of course, Sabrent Q4 being the very slowest. But I think we're nearly in the game now, and we're in, and we're ready to go. So the first thing we're going to do is jump into that car and put some distance behind the wheel so we can see if the game's going to have any difficulty with some of this asset building. So let's move quickly as we can. Once again, I am viewing this via the capture, so there's this tiny delay between what my inputs are and what you see on screen. That is my justification for the horrendous driving that you are going to witness. But still, nonetheless, I think this is running fine. The textures are running good. In fact, why not have the mad camera while we're doing this? Let's make this even harder, but this will force the game to have to keep the assets running as quickly as possible as we go. But for now, let's carry on. Some dude's actually shooting at me. I might die. This might be the first time I've ever died in the GTA segment of these videos. But for now, yep, I think the textures are running just as well as I would like. And for now, why don't we head back into the PS5 menus, exit the game, and move that data over and summarize some of what we've seen today. Because I knew this SSD would do well. There's some SSDs that I've tested, some of the lower tier stuff, some of the SSDs that have got reported 5,000 megs, or some of the ones using the Firezone E16 controller. These ones that I knew wouldn't exactly, be the best, and therefore they might show hiccups. But I kind of always knew that this Titan Micro SSD would do absolutely fine. It's not one of the more commonly known ones, and the TH7175 is not a drive that's commercially known. It's not a big brand. It's one of the ones that professionals and enterprise companies use. But if you can get hold of it, it's still one of the best benchmarked drives out there in terms of sequential read and write, and indeed some of the higher IOPS on the 4TB. Now, this has been the test of that Titan Micro drive, but it's worth the Titanium Micro. But also, it's worth remembering that this is video 1 of 3. We've got follow-up videos on this. They're going to be featuring everything from Borderlands to Rocket League, from Spider-Man to Oddworld, and all of those games will be tested one by one. So if you have enjoyed this video, click like. It helps me understand what you guys like, and I know they're repetitive, but it's the only way to test every SSD fairly. If you've got any questions, any games that you want featured, or any particular SSDs you want featured, go into the comments and let me know, and go into click subscribe and the bell to be notified about more videos as they come up with different SSDs as the beta for PS5 is tested to its fullest, and when the full version of SSD support on the PS5 is established, we're going to know what are the best SSDs to try. And do take advantage of the links in the description to every product I've talked about in these videos, along with a bunch of heatsinks that I recommend, as well as the free advice section over on NAS Compares. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.